So what if seduction? Well, what if it isn't really about, superficial charm or just romantic games? What if it's something much, much deeper? More precise even, frankly, quite dangerous. Today we're doing a deep dive into someone whose name is, well, basically synonymous with romance and pursuit, Giacomo Casanova. Now most people think of him as, a libertine, maybe a charming rogue. But the sources we've looked at, they suggest his actual insights into attraction, his philosophy, go way beyond just surface stuff. Our focus today is really exploring Casanova's psychology of attraction, but through the specific empathic lens. And look, this isn't going to be some casual guide to flirting. What we're about to unpack here is described as, and I quote, a deep, precise, and dangerous art of emotional influence. Let me be crystal clear right from the start. We are talking about tools, actual techniques that can tap directly into a person's mind, their heart, drawing them in with this profound level of understanding. But, and this is the crucial warning right up front, if these tools are not handled with real integrity, they can easily become manipulation just, cloaked in kindness. It's a really perilous path we're stepping onto.
Yeah, and that warning isn't just like a throwaway line. It's absolutely critical to everything we're discussing. What we're aiming to reveal today are these, well, powerful emotional strategies, the philosophical ideas behind them, and the practical psychological tools Casanova seems to have mastered. Our goal isn't to teach you how to be Casanova, definitely not. It's to shed light on how these techniques actually work, why they have such immense power, and maybe most importantly, why they demand extreme caution from anyone exploring them. There's profound influence here, and with that kind of influence, comes a very real potential for harm if it's not understood and, frankly, handled with the utmost responsibility.
Okay, let's really try and unpack this then. It sounds almost backward, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Starting with humility and something often linked with, confidence, bravado, outward charm. But Casanova's foundational principle, the very first step on this perilous path, was exactly that. Start with humility.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake people make about attraction, you think, that Casanova just completely flips on its head with this idea of assuming nothing about someone?
Well, the biggest trap, the deadly mistake, is thinking you already get people. Or worse, thinking they're simple. Casanova apparently never did that. He approached every new person with this almost childlike curiosity, but combined it with the discipline of a strategist. He watched, he listened, he explored the other person like they're this undiscovered country, a complex text. Our sources really emphasize that everyone basically wears a mask. It's crafted by culture, by past hurts, by insecurities, by their deepest wants. If you mistake that mask for who they really are, you're not seeing them at all. You're just seeing a stereotype. Or maybe worse, you're just seeing your own stuff projected onto them. So the immediate warning here is pretty deep. The more certain you feel about someone early on, the more likely it is you're just falling into your own biases, your own ideas, not genuine understanding. You're seeing what you expect or want to see, not what's actually there. And that right there, that opens the door to self-deception, which ultimately just tanks any chance of real connection. It stops being about them and becomes about your blind spots.
Wow, okay. That completely shifts the perspective, doesn't it? It's not about imposing yourself. It's about truly perceiving them. And that humility, that first act of really seeing, it leads right into empathic listening. Our sources highlight that Casanova's real power wasn't just like his witty lines or his sensuality. It was his presence. When he was with someone, they felt truly seen, not just as their role, like the wife or the merchant, but as a unique human being. You mentioned emotional magic, but for most of us, listening feels pretty passive. How did Casanova turn it into something so active, so powerful, that it actually felt like magic to the other person, made them feel heard to the bone?
Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly powerful and frankly a bit unnerving. Most people just go through life barely feeling heard, right? Their words kind of bounce off. Other people are wrapped up in their own heads. Casanova did the complete opposite. He made them the absolute center of his universe in that moment. The key insight seems to be that true listening isn't just about gathering facts. It's about validating their unacknowledged self. When you mirror their language back, when you reflect their feelings, maybe repeat ideas they only hinted at, it feels like emotional magic to them because psychologically, we all crave being understood that deeply. It's like you're speaking the secret language of their soul, saying the things they couldn't quite find words for themselves. However, and this is a really crucial warning, you absolutely cannot fake this. False empathy, people can sniff that out even if it's subconscious. They might not call you on it, but they will pull back emotionally. That fragile connection you were trying to build, it just evaporates, leaving you looking, well, disingenuous, manipulative even.
Right. So it's genuine internal tuning, not just putting on an act. That leads us perfectly into visceral empathy. Well, our sources emphasize that mood is the primary language here, maybe even more than words. How do you actually tune into those feeling tones, noticing what makes someone, shrink back or light up, registering it first in your body, not just analyzing it in your head? Sounds intuitive, but also potentially.
You're touching on a really powerful, almost subconscious communication channel there. And Casanova seems to have mastered this. When he stepped into someone's emotional space, he adjusted himself like a chameleon, not necessarily to deceive, but to harmonize, to resonate with their emotional atmosphere. You're not just hearing their words, you're feeling the tension in their voice, maybe watching their posture shift, sensing their internal weather almost reflected in your own body. If they seem anxious, you might notice a tightness in your own chest. If they're projecting arrogance, maybe your own muscles subtly tense up. Paying attention to those physical responses gives you invaluable, often hidden clues about their inner state, clues they might not even be consciously aware of themselves. But here's the danger, and it's a significant one. Don't lose yourself in it. This visceral empathy, if you take it too far, can slide into over-identification. If you just become an emotional echo, if you lose your own distinctiveness by trying too hard to match their mood, you actually lose your ability to attract them. You become just a reflection, not a unique, compelling person with your own magnetic pull. That line between empathy and just absorbing their emotions is super thin.
That makes perfect sense. You've got to maintain your own center, your own pull. And building on that mirroring idea, there's the more conscious use of the chameleon effect through mirror them subtly. People unconsciously mimic those they feel close to. It builds rapport. So how can you consciously use this subtly mirroring body language or mood to create that feeling of safety without being, obvious? Because if it's too obvious, it just looks like you're mimicking them, right? Which is creepy.
Exactly. Subtlety is absolutely the key word there. You can consciously match some things. A slight head tilt they do, mirroring an open posture if they have one. You can subtly mirror their mood. If they're being serious and reflective, your expression might become more contemplative. If they laugh, you genuinely join in. You could even mirror them emotionally, perhaps by carefully revealing a related vulnerability if they're being self-deprecating, or kind of riding their wave of excitement if they're elated. That's how they start to trust you, maybe even crave your presence on a deeper subconscious level. But, and this is a really serious warning, if you do it too obviously, it feels manipulative and creepy. Full stop. Casanova's mirroring was apparently invisible. It felt like coincidence, not tactic, just this organic alignment. If you overdo it, exaggerate it, you risk looking like a weird mimic or, worse, a calculating manipulator. And that instantly shatters the trust you were trying to build. Suspicion replaces connection.
Okay, so subtlety is everything there. Once you've managed that subtle mirroring, harmonizing with their mood, Casanova didn't just stop. He moved from that intuitive feel to a more calculated stage, which sounds even more dangerous. This is where analytic empathy comes in. He didn't just feel people, he actively studied them, their backstories, families, tastes, traumas, insecurities. How do you actually learn them like a complex text, observing patterns, identifying these emotional keys?
Yeah, this is the strategic use of emotional data. And it's maybe particularly useful with people you don't immediately click with, the ones you don't feel that instant connection with. Don't just give up. Learn them, like you said, like a complex text. What values do they really hold dear? What old wounds do they keep skirting around? Are there symbols, metaphors, even specific phrases they keep using? What's the core fear that seems to drive them, or the deepest desire they hardly ever mention? Every layer you uncover with this analytic empathy makes the potential connection deeper because you're mapping out their unique inner blueprint. It lets you bypass the superficial stuff and speak more directly to their real self. But it's absolutely vital to heed this warning. You must avoid reducing people to just formulas, to a collection of data points to be exploited. This is supposed to be a tool for deeper intimacy, for genuine connection, not for cold, calculating control. If you approach it like it's just analytical data mining, you lose the human element entirely. And ironically, that makes the whole thing ineffective and, yeah, potentially really harmful. It turns a potential relationship into a kind of sterile equation.
Right. Okay. And once you have that deep understanding, that inner blueprint, it seems like the next incredibly powerful step is to speak their desire back to them. This is about naming what they feel deep down, but maybe can't articulate themselves, something that could really pierce their soul, as the source material puts it. Can you give us some examples of how that might actually sound? Because it feels like a really potent move.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember this isn't flattery. Flattery is superficial. This is about articulating their deepest, often unacknowledged truths. So you might observe a pattern in their behavior and say something like, "You strike me as someone who really dislikes surface things. You seem to crave what's real, what's authentic, even if it's sometimes uncomfortable." Or maybe, "You seem like someone who often carries the weight of other people's expectations, but you rarely let others carry some of yours." Another example could be, "I give the sense you have this spirit that really yearns for freedom, even if your current circumstances feel a bit constraining." These aren't just wild guesses. They're informed observations based on that empathic listening and analysis. They resonate deeply because you're giving voice to their hidden internal landscape. People, our source suggests, really respond to the person who names what they feel but couldn't express. You almost become their emotional translator, their oracle. However, and this is a really stark warning attached to this power, do not use this insight to exploit them. If you name their deepest wounds simply to manipulate it, to gain an advantage, maybe make them dependent on you, you will inevitably destroy the trust you worked so hard to build. That kind of betrayal can cause lasting emotional damage, much deeper than any surface-level deception. This technique is meant for profound connection, for true understanding, not for weaponizing their vulnerabilities. The difference is entirely in your intent.
That is, yeah, a powerful and definitely dangerous line to walk. Understanding the why behind their feelings like that. And once you've built that deep empathic connection and you have this ability to articulate their inner world, the focus seems to shift slightly. From pure empathy to subtly influencing their mind. How do you actually embed yourself in their imagination? Make them wonder about you, maybe using stories, metaphors, or little unresolved gestures, leaving space for them to almost obsess about you.
Right. This is about orchestrating kind of emotional echo inside their head, making you linger long after you've actually left their presence. The human mind, as our source explains, tends to replay things it can't immediately figure out or resolve. So you might share something incredibly meaningful, maybe a deeply personal observation about them, and then strategically disappear for a day or two. Just create a little space. Or maybe give them a small, thoughtful gift that reflects their inner world, not just their status or something generic, like a specific book on a topic you discussed passionately, or even just a small object, a stone you found, that reminded you of a story they told you. You're deliberately leaving these little emotional breadcrumbs for their mind to circle back to fill in the gaps, wonder what you meant, wonder when they'll hear from you again. But here's the crucial warning. This is absolutely not the same as ghosting. Ghosting is cruel, it's damaging. This idea of absence must be meaningful, not cruel. If you just vanish without any trace or clear positive intent behind it, it completely undermines any trust you've built. It doesn't build longing, it builds resentment and anxiety. The goal is to make them think of you with warmth, with curiosity, not feel abandoned or disrespected. It's this delicate art of creating intellectual and emotional suspense.
Okay, so curated mystery, not just vanishing. That makes sense. And we hear that Casanova's lovers felt safe with him, but they were never bored. This points towards this idea of offer emotional safety, then create subtle tension. How did he manage that balance, providing consistency like these emotional anchors, but then occasionally disrupting the pattern using what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement?
Yeah, this dynamic is fascinating because it's supposedly what makes the bond obsessive and keeps it compelling. You provide those anchors of consistency, maybe a certain look you only give them, a particular time you usually reach out, a shared private joke, a consistent small act of kindness. These things create a baseline of safety and predictability. They feel secure, they know you care, they feel you'll likely be there. But then you subtly occasionally break that pattern, be unpredictably thoughtful in a new way, send a message completely out of the blue that references something deep they said last week, suddenly show up with a profound insight, and then maybe subtly withdraw for a moment, leaving them wanting just a little bit more. This intermittent reinforcement, this dance between predictable presence and slight, intriguing absence, creates this compelling push-pull dynamic. It keeps them engaged, always sort of looking forward, wondering about the next interaction. Now, the warning here is crystal clear. If that tension becomes anxiety, if your unpredictability starts to feel like instability or creates real doubt in them, they will shut down, emotionally, relationally. It has to remain playful and enticing, a delightful uncertainty, not something distressing or anxiety-provoking. That line between playful tension and genuine anxiety is incredibly fine, and if you cross it, you risk breaking the bond entirely instead of strengthening it. It's about sparking anticipation, not fear.
Right. And speaking of maintaining your own pull, your own center through all this, a crucial element in Casanova's approach, maybe the most fundamental one for handling these tools responsibly, was self-love. He didn't pretend to be perfect. Apparently, he seduced with his flaws, radiating this core security. How does someone cultivate that kind of resilience and self-acceptance to be truly magnetic, especially when dealing with potentially manipulative emotional tools?
What's really interesting here is what our source calls the middle way. You have to essentially love yourself enough to not need validation and enough to genuinely give. Casanova reportedly knew his own flaws intimately. He could laugh off rejection, stay calm even when insulted. That kind of inner resilience, that self-possession, is profoundly magnetic. Think about it. If you feel superior to others, your empathy will feel fake, condescending. But equally, if you secretly hate yourself, if you're constantly seeking approval and validation from them, your whole approach becomes needy. It's driven by your lack, not by genuine connection. And that neediness ultimately repels people rather than truly attracting them. So the warning here is pretty blunt, quite unyielding. Seduction without self-love turns manipulative fast. It just does.
Oh.
Without a solid, authentic sense of your own worth, you will inevitably end up seeking external validation to fill your own inner emptiness. And that twists the entire dynamic into this desperate attempt to use others to prop up your fragile ego instead of fostering a genuinely empowering mutual connection.
That makes profound sense. You can't really connect healthily if you're not grounded in yourself first. And closely related to that, something that really amplifies the previous point about absence and presence, is Casanova's mastery of controlled absence, this idea of orchestrated longing. How do you consciously step back and actually let them miss you, leaving behind those little emotional artifacts, a phrase, a memory, but then returning fully, genuinely when you reappear?
This contrast, this dynamic of longing and fulfillment, is described as profoundly powerful. It can literally build what feels like emotional addiction in the most intense sense. Once you've embedded yourself emotionally, once you've offered that deep understanding and connection, you then strategically, carefully step back. You create space. You let them miss that feeling, miss you. You leave behind those emotional artifacts. Maybe it's a specific, almost private nickname you use just for them, a shared inside joke only you two get, or maybe a really profound observation you made about their life's dream that keeps replaying in their head. These aren't just random memories. They're like subtle emotional anchors that keep you present in their thoughts, building this subtle, almost physical ache for your presence again. But, and this is absolutely critical, when you do return, you must return fully. Listen intently, laugh genuinely, reflect their feelings, be completely present. You have to validate the longing they felt with real, authentic engagement. However, let's be clear, this is a deeply powerful and potentially very harmful technique because it directly plays on what psychologists often call abandonment wounds, those deep-seated fears we might have of being left alone or rejected. The warning is stark. Absence must be paired with trust. You should never vanish without explanation. The absence needs to feel like it has a purpose, maybe allowing them space, creating anticipation, not like rejection. If they perceive it as genuine abandonment, the damage can be irreparable. It breeds resentment and deep emotional pain, not longing. It's like walking a tightrope over a very deep chasm.
Wow. That's a strong, incredibly important caveat to keep in mind. Okay, finally, there's this principle. Always appeal to their self-interest. Why is it so vital not to appeal to pity or mercy, but instead to align your presence with their dreams, making them feel, clever, admired, inspired just by being near you?
Because fundamentally, people resent feeling obligated. They really hate feeling like they're helping someone out of guilt or pity or some sense of duty they didn't ask for. Instead, your presence, your connection with them, must always feel like a gain for them and not a sacrifice they're making. If they deeply desire power or influence, let them feel more powerful, more influential when they're interacting with you. If they crave recognition, be the first one to truly see and articulate their unique talents or achievements. You're positioning yourself not as someone who needs rescuing or pity, but as someone who elevates them, who helps them move closer to their own deepest desires and potential. And the warning here is very direct. If they start feeling like they're helping you out of guilt or obligation, they'll inevitably pull back, and they'll likely resent you for making them feel that way. But if they feel elevated by you, if they perceive your presence as inherently beneficial to their own self-interest, their own dreams, as someone who makes them feel cleverer, more admired, more inspired, they'll return again and again.
Yeah.
It becomes about mutual empowerment through connection, not exploitation through creating emotional debt.
So if we tie all these threads together, it becomes chillingly clear, doesn't it? Casanova's empathic seduction, this whole framework, is a profoundly potent force for emotional influence, and that line between genuine, deep connection and, dangerous manipulation is incredibly thin, and as we've discussed, terrifyingly easy to cross maybe even without realizing it.
Precisely, and this art, as the source material suggests, toys not just with hearts but with identities. It stirs up these deep psychological responses that can be incredibly difficult to navigate, honestly, for both people involved. Understanding how these mechanisms work is vital, not just if you are ever tempted to wield such influence yourself, but maybe more importantly, for recognizing when it might be being used on you. And crucially, for trying to discern the true intent behind other people's actions. The power is undeniable, and so is the responsibility that comes with it.
It's a truly heavy thought, isn't it? One that carries immense weight. Casanova himself famously said something like, to win a woman, take advantage of the mood she's in. Which, in isolation, sounds pretty opportunistic, maybe even cynical. But our sources immediately follow that with a profound final warning, this stark counterpoint. But always remember, once you win her heart, you are responsible for it. What you stir in others, it will inevitably return to you, often magnified. So the question lingers, how will you choose to wield such profound influence should you ever find yourself possessing it? Really think about that for a moment. The implications go way beyond just romance. They touch the very fabric of every human interaction, every relationship you have. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Casanova's perilous, complex path of empathic seduction. We definitely encourage you to stay curious, keep peeling back the layers of human psychology, but always with critical thinking and deep ethical consideration when it comes to understanding and influencing human connection. Until next time.